Hey there, it's Ocean Communications back again with another review, this time of Johnny Handsome. Johnny Handsome is a 1989 film directed by Walter Hill. It stars Mickey Rourke, Elizabeth McGovern, Forrest Whitaker, and Morgan Freeman. It also has Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin. It's got a great cast. It really does. It's an excellent cast. And It's another one of those films that Carlico did before their untimely demise when they released Cutthroat Island. And I was honestly, I was pretty disappointed by this. I'm a big fan of Walter Hill, except for films like this, Bullet to the Balls, which I'll get to a little bit later. But I really like his style. I really like the way he directs his films. I really like the sensibility that he has with his movies. He definitely does have a style that's all his own. This sort of it's kind of hard to explain. It's very slick. I think that's a good way to say it. It's very slick, sophisticated. Really, really grabs your eye. And Johnny Handsome has a lot of good scenes in this and in it that really do grab your eye. I mean, it is a very good-looking movie. The lighting is great. It's got a good score by Ry Cooder. It's got a good atmosphere to it, and it's got an interesting concept at first. The story itself is fairly interesting, and it's got good performances by the cast. But why is it disappointing? Because after it gets to a certain point, after Johnny Handsome gets a new face, it goes downhill. Because it just becomes a very generic, been there, done that, revenge flick. Nothing about it is unique, except for maybe the style and maybe the way that it's edited. And the story just becomes unengaging. And it becomes fairly dull, kind of boring. I disagree with Gene Siskel, who gave it 2 thumbs up. He says it's a powerhouse ending. I'd like to see it again. Why is it a powerhouse ending? I mean, there's some blood and there's good. Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin do get it good, but I'll get to why I think it's not a powerhouse ending. Anyway, in this film, Mickey Rourke stars as Johnny Handsome, John Sedley, actually, not John Stanley. And his character is called Johnny Handsome because in the beginning of the film, he doesn't look like this. He looks like a really ugly looking guy. He's got like growths all over his face. You can't understand a word he's saying. He looks like a monster. So people call him Johnny Handsome as a way to insult him. So you have this whole sort of thing where um, there's a scene where Mickey Rourke talks about how he was at this place that he was staying at, like a home for like maybe the mentally disturbed and stuff like that, or people with disabilities. And he's there, and he ends up getting made fun of by this guy who takes off his mask, which is a jack-o'-lantern mask, and says, "Johnny don't need no mask. Johnny don't need no mask." And so you really do feel for Mickey Rourke's character, and it's good makeup effects on his face, uh, and it's actually pretty compelling in the beginning of the film. It's actually really interesting. So even though he's disfigured, he's found a friend, and but his friend isn't into the most good sort of stuff. He's kind of likes robbing banks, so he gets Johnny to he teaches Johnny the tricks of the trade, and so he and Johnny then get together, and they employ the services of a couple other people to help him with this job. So and those happen to be this character named Rafe, played by Lance Henriksen, and his girlfriend, who is I forgot her name, but it's played by Ellen Barkin, who's gorgeous in this as always. I mean, I love Ellen Barkin, and the deal goes bad. Lance Henriksen, Rafe, and his girlfriend, he guns down his friend, and they try to shoot Johnny, but he manages to get away. And Rafe and Ellen Barkin, Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin run away with all the money, and Johnny gets nabbed. He gets arrested. And that's where you get Morgan Freeman in a bit role. He plays, I think he plays a sheriff or a lieutenant, a guy who the guy who caught Johnny. And Johnny gets sent to this. It's interesting. Like he gets sent to a prison where he's picking cotton, I guess, and he's picking cotton, and one of the guys stabs him, beats him up, and stabs him, but he survives, and he's in the hospital. And then you have Forrest Whitaker in a great performance. One of the better performances I've seen him have, actually. I've seen with Forrest Whitaker, and he's there, and he basically asks Johnny for permission if they can use him as. Not he says it's not an experiment. It's just a way to give you a new face. So they ask him for his permission. Johnny reluctantly agrees, and then you have this passage of time that goes by while Forrest Whitaker and his colleagues reconstruct Johnny's face with the latest in technology. And at first they start with the lower half of his face, and then they finish up with the top half. And that's, then he looks like Mickey Rourke, not Mickey Rourke with loads of prosthetic makeup. And that first half of the film is when the movie's the most engaging and interesting. And it still keeps your interest a little bit after that, where now he's getting ready to live this new life, and there's even a good scene where Mickey Rourke is touching his face, and he's like, "It still feels like I'm wearing a mask," because he's not used to having a face like this, and so he ends up trying. He gets a job through the help of Forrest Whitaker, who gives him a recommendation and gives him a job in the shipyards. And there he meets Elizabeth McGovern, a co-worker of his. They have a little bit of a fling. It's not much. The sex scene's well shot, though. It's very artistic. It definitely shows Walter Hill's talents as a director. And the editing was pretty solid in that, too. I'm trying to find the editor here. It was showing me the editor on the back of it, and this is all I really have to go off of is the back of this. But whoever did the editing did a solid job. And the director of photography or cinematographer, Matthew F. Leonetti, did a solid job. And he normally does a solid job. He's done a lot of stuff. And so they have this little fling, and while the sex scene was well shot and it was artistic, there's no chemistry between these two. And it's just one of those, they meet, they have a little bit of fling, Johnny forgets about her, and for a little bit, she still cares about him. She gets brought into the film later on near the climax, and she gets taken by Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin, and Johnny is to save her. Pretty much typical home, been there, done that type stuff with the plot. And I didn't think Elizabeth McGovern's performance is that great either. She's supposed to have this like Bayou New Orleans accent, but it just sounds so fake, and it just doesn't work. Plus, they don't have very much chemistry. It just seems like they're there to bone for a little bit in an artistic fashion, and then that's it. And then after that, when it starts getting to this moment, is when the film starts to fall apart for me. It's a film of two halves. It's a film of very interesting, engaging first half, where you have Mickey Rourke delivering a really great performance as this disfigured man, Johnny Handsome, who gets a new face and a new life. Then once he gets this new life, it devolves into typical revenge stuff, and you honestly start to cease to give a shit about Johnny. Because what happens is, as soon as he gets a new face and he bangs Elizabeth McGovern, he ends up going to the bar that Lance Henriksen owns and basically starts up a job on the shipyard where his girlfriend works. So it's all like one of those things where he hasn't learned anything. Morgan Freeman was right when he told him, you and I both know where you're going to end up after this is all over. And it's just kind of like, oh, great. I know once a con, always a con. I get it, but I think it'd be more interesting to at least see Johnny make an attempt to rehabilitate himself. And then maybe he gets forced into doing the deal or something because of his love or something like that for his girlfriend or something, just kidnapped or something. I know that's be cliched as well, but it'd be more engaging than this because Once he decides to screw over his company that he's working for, steal all the money, and basically put his girlfriend out of a job because they're not going to have any money anymore because all of it's gotten stolen by, Johnny Handsome and like his pals. Which I get the whole point. He's trying to get revenge on the death of his friend and the guys who screwed him over, which is Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin. But there's another way you can go about this, and the film just decides to go with this. I'm just gonna set him up. I'm gonna set up a deal. I'm gonna rob my job at this the place I'm working at the shipyard, and and then he's gonna find a way to take him out along the way. And then the film just drags from that point on, because the robbery scene in the beginning was actually really well shot and kinetic, full of energy and interesting, quick cut edits and interesting choices for directing. Like Walter Hill had a lot of up close shots of the robbers wearing these weird looking masks, and it just created this very surreal looking weird feel to it. Ry Cooder's score definitely added to it as well. And it just had this sort of cartoonish sort of feel to it, but it wasn't in a bad way. It's hard to explain. You just have to see the film to see what I'm talking about. And here it's just generic. They got bandanas on and goggles, and they go in and they steal the money, and then they get away, and it's not much of anything. And then Johnny gets Morgan Freeman meets up with him. He's like, he's gonna arrest him, but he gives Johnny 10 minutes to try to get revenge. And he goes in. Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin have figured out who he is because they went in and tried to find him because they found out he took the money. And Johnny met up with some governor guy, I guess, and gave him the money. And then, of course, Morgan Freeman finds the governor guy, just like that, really easily. And it seemed like Morgan Freeman was just psychic. He just knew everything in this movie to catch everybody doing everything bad. And then he's kind of questionable too, because you're like, he's gonna take the money. You're like, he's gonna take the money back to the precinct, or is he just gonna take the money and leave and go on vacation? It's not really explained what he's gonna do with the money. Excuse me, just clearing my throat, clearing my sinuses there. And so then it leads up to this climax, the showdown in the graveyard. Well shot. I like the lighting in this. I like the location. And Mickey Rourke comes in, tries to put a gun on Lance Henriksen and Ellen Barkin, and Lance Henriksen think I'm fucking stupid, and he's like, I'm not prepared for that. Then Ellen Barkin brings out his girlfriend Elizabeth McGovern. Lance Henriksen beats the shit out of Mickey Rourke, slices him in the cheek a couple times, he's trying to make him ugly again, and then asks him to give him the code to open the suitcase of money. And this is actually a pretty good, well-written scene here. I didn't mind this. The writing in this there were some moments that were good. I mean, in terms of the writing and the screenplay by Ken Friedman. And this is definitely one of them, where he's like, wait a second. You think I'm just going to open this suitcase and it's going to blow up right in my face, right? I'm not that fucking stupid. I'm not that fucking stupid, or, you open it. It's gonna blow up. It's gonna blow up in your face, Johnny. So I didn't mind that, because I actually thought that, oh, he's gonna blow him up with a suitcase. But then you find out, and actually a bit of clever writing, that it isn't that. Johnny opens the suitcase and he left another gun in there, and then he just blows away Lance Henriksen, shoots Ellen Barkin, but she shoots him with a fatal, pretty much ends up being a fatal shot. Morgan Freeman shows up to the graveyard because the 10 minutes are up. Elizabeth McGovern is crying over the loss of Johnny. Johnny's dying, and his last words are, "How's my face? Does it look good?" And then he dies. Then the movie's over, pretty much. I mean, Morgan Freeman says some things, but never said anything. And then, yeah, that's Johnny Handsome. That's what I mean by disappointing. It's got a good concept. It's got a good story, but it's got a weak ending. It's got it's I don't get what Gene Siskel, an ending I'd like to see again, a powerhouse ending I'd like to see it again. Why is this ending powerhouse? To me, it just sounds like fuck. I don't need to watch this movie again then because the guy dies, and I don't give a shit about him either because he's a scumbag con who gets a new face and then just uses it just to rob another place. And he was gonna just leave with the money, and he told his girlfriend to fuck off anyway. But in one scene, pretty much told her to get the fuck away from me. And then he doesn't make an attempt to rehabilitate himself. And then I'm supposed to feel for him when he's getting punched in the face by Lance Henriksen, and Lance Henriksen is cutting him up. I'm like, no, actually, fuck him. So that doesn't really help the film. It'd be like if Darkman was about a con who got blown up, and then he's getting revenge, but he's also robbing banks and shit, and it's nowhere near as interesting because he's not using a new face, not using new masks and stuff. He just got a new reconstructed face, and then he tries to get with Julie, and then it doesn't work out, and then he just ends up going back to robbing banks, and he ends up dying in the end. It's not. Does that sound like a good version of Darkman to you? No, it doesn't. Honestly, I could see this film getting a remake and give it more action because there's not a lot of it. More action, more unique ways of how he gets revenge, and just a better ending. And make the character of Johnny Handsome somebody you actually care about and give a shit about. And you sympathize with him because of his plight, because of how disfigured he's been for most of his life. But once you realize he's just a crook, you cease to sympathize with him. He's just a crook with an ugly face. Great. He's a crook with an ugly face. He's an ugly fucker, but he's also a crook and he breaks the law and he's an ass. Why should I give a shit what happens to him? That's a problem. But I would say it was worth a watch, though, at least once for the direction by Walter Hill, for the style that he presented in this. There's some really good bits of editing I love. There's one where it's raining and he's talking to Elizabeth McGovern. He's got an umbrella up, and then the way it's shot, I just love how the light is reflecting off the raindrops, and a lot of neon, which is a lot of stuff that Walter Hill loves to do. And then it just cuts. There's a cut, which I love, where it's like the umbrella becomes part of the edit, and it just goes across the screen, and it becomes a transition to the next scene. That was really clever. And it's only a full screen version of the film, but I got enough of it. But it would be kind of interesting to see some of the shots in widescreen, but I don't know how much of a difference that would make. It wouldn't make that much of a difference because the plot itself is, like I said, it's a tale of two halves. It's two-faced in a way, just like Johnny Handsome. The scenes where he's ugly and disfigured and disformed are more interesting than the scenes after he gets of new face. So anyway, I really don't know what else to say about Johnny Handsome, except I was rated out of 5 stars. I would give it 2.5 out of 5. It's not the worst thing ever. It's not terrible. It's not so shitty you can't stand it. It's definitely one of my least favorite films from Walter Hill. It's just, like I said, it's just I don't like the second half that much. And that's what hurts the film. And I just think it could be, there are some really clever bits of writing, and there's some other moments where it's not so clever. And overall, it's just disappointing. But anyway, yeah, 2.5 star flick, below average. But anyway, I really don't know what to say except thank you for watching my review of Johnny Handsome, and I will see you guys later. See ya.